Hey, we're back. Sorry, I was just getting my reading in for today. I like to read. I like to read for pleasure, extensive reading. How about you guys? Do you guys like to read? No one's typing. Oh no. That means you're probably reading a book like I was too. A lot. Katarina likes to read a lot in capital letters, so she's letting us know that's quite a lot. Yes. All right. I'm going to assume lots of us enjoy reading for pleasure. But have you ever thought about using literature to teach the English language? Well, I've given it some thought, but not as much as our special guest today. Akis Panayi will be joining us again. Akis, are you there?
I'm right here. Hello. Hi, Terry.
Hi, Akis. Welcome back.
What was that book you were reading?
It's quite an interesting book. It's a little bit below my level. It's an A1 level graded reader from Hamilton House called Under Your Feet. So learning about the tectonic plates is never a bad thing. No matter what's happening.
Right.
Okay, so Akis, before I turn everything over to you, I just want to remind everyone watching us that whether you are watching us here in Click Meeting on our platform, or if you're watching us streaming live on Facebook, I will have my eye on both platforms. So any questions you have, firstly, I want to remind you that we will have a question and answer segment at the end of the talk. So unless it's something really pressing, let's hold our questions till the end. Unless, of course, Akis asks you some questions to answer. So we will have a question and answer section at the end. So without further ado, Akis, they're all yours.
Right. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. It feels really good to be here again in this second session of this week. And as Terry said before, today we're going to look at how we can use literature to our benefit and to our students' benefit in order to teach the language. And I'm glad to see that you enjoy reading yourselves, because, as we all know, teaching is an ongoing learning process. It never stops. So our title for today, the title of this presentation is Using Literature to Teach the Language. And let me check. Okay. Right. A few words about myself before we start, so you know who's doing this. My name is Akis Panayi, and I'm a Cambridge presenter, examiner, a writer, and a classroom teacher above all. Right, and in the next 45 minutes, what we will be doing is the following. We are going to look at what we consider as literature. What is literature? What literature can offer? What teachers must bear in mind before choosing a literary text to use in the classroom? We're going to look at some examples of how literature sometimes breaks the rules of grammar and syntax, and that we should make our students aware of this. Some ideas for activities to use in the classroom, poetry activities, but not only. And we're going to target the question, is Shakespeare for everyone? What do you think about that? Let's begin with this as a quick warm-up. Look at that question. Is Shakespeare for everyone? What would you say if someone asked you that question? Yes or no? Can you type in the chat box whether you think Shakespeare is for everyone? Just type yes or no. Okay. Thank you, Katerina. Mary, you said yes. All right. Okay. Ivana says no. Eleni, yes. Um, Hello, Romania. Not really, says Fodini. Okay. Yeah, it's Shakespeare is a it's a whole topic and subject on his own. And but we are going to target Shakespeare today, and see what we can do with him and with his plays. Yusuf says yes, but we need to adapt his texts. All right, thank you very much. Yes, okay. And at the end, hopefully, we will be able to draw some conclusions. Okay, but first things first. What is literature? What do we consider when we say literature? What do we mean? There are two meanings. The broad meaning of literature is that it applies to any collection of written work. It's the literature, whether that's science or economics, any collection is called the literature. But today we're going to look at the narrow definition of literature, which is what comes to our head when we speak the word literature. That is poetry, prose, and drama. Let's not forget that literature is also spoken or sang, like Elvis Presley that we have on our screen. So, what do we consider as literature? Things like novels, short stories, plays, and poems, but not only. Literature also includes movie scripts, song lyrics, memoirs, and so on and so forth. Now, let's look at what literature can offer. I'm not going to bother you with things like why we should use literature and what are the benefits of literature and the positive things that our students can get from reading literature. But we're going to focus on 4 or 5 main ideas and main points on what literature has to offer in the classroom. Literature is motivating, first of all, because of the complexity of the themes that we find in literary texts. For example, we have the main characters, human versus nature, or human versus society, or fate, or even human versus self. And that's something that we and the students can relate to. We can relate to the characters experiences and what they are going through. Another thing that literature can offer is that it's interesting because of unexpected uses of language, like the example that we have on our screen. Someone's married their everyone's, laughed their cryings, and did their dance. That's taken from a poem. Now, that is language that you do not come across in our course books. Literature, the third bullet point, literature also gives access to different cultures and their history. For example, Afghan children whose ears know only the sounds of bomb and gunfire from the Kite Runner. It's interesting because when I was setting up this presentation and preparing this slides, it was long before the new developments going on in Afghanistan right now, and this quote is very relevant today, yeah. So literature gives us access, gives us insight to different cultures. Another thing that it does is that it supplements the restricted linguistic input of course books. What we have said before, something similar to what we have said before, that the language used in literature is not graded, and it's something that you don't find in course books. Like, for example, the rabbits sat as quietly as little grey sculptured stones from John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. And lastly, literary texts demand more active involvement from the reader, from us and the students, because of the complex themes. Okay, let's move on to the next part of our session today, which is what teachers must bear in mind when we're choosing a literary text for our class. So before choosing a text for your class, think about the following. Is the language level appropriate? And we go back to the question that we answered at the beginning about Shakespeare. Is Shakespeare for everyone? Well, the language used in Shakespeare is not for everyone. Therefore, if we're teaching a lower level class, we should find a text that suits their level. Is it the right length for the time available? Well, we have 6 or 7 months of teaching. Therefore, we should choose a text that is the right length for the time that we have at hand. Is it culturally offensive in any way? Now, nowadays we teach in multicultural classrooms. Therefore, something that is not offensive in one culture might be offensive in another culture, and that is something we should take into consideration. And lastly, can it be easily exploited for language purposes? After all, let's not forget that we are teaching the language. We're not teaching literature. We're using it as a means to teach the language. So does the text have enough language in it which can be exploited for the purposes of the classroom? And at Hamilton House, we take all these questions into consideration, and we propose and we offer some classic readers to our learners. And I will show you an example which is taken from Amazing English 1. Those of you teaching Amazing English 1, you know that what you see on your screen right now comes from the software, where on the left-hand side of your screen at the bottom, you see 2 primary classic readers, William Tell and Peter Pan. Now, what you can do with your students here, we have this on the software. You can project it on the screen and read the story with your students. You can do mini reading sessions. There are also nice pictures accompanying the text, and at the end there are exercises like comprehension questions such as true or false, and vocabulary activities. Having said that, let's go back to one more thing that teachers must bear in mind and think about before choosing a literary text. And that is the subject likely to interest my students? The topic, the subject of the literary text. What is it about? The theme. Will it interest my students? For instance, we have Shakespeare right there. Is Shakespeare likely to interest teenagers? Well, that's debatable, isn't it? What do you think? Is Shakespeare likely to interest teenagers? If you told your teenage students today that, okay, students, today we're going to do some Shakespeare, how do you think they would react? Would they enjoy Shakespeare? If they have seen the movie, yes, but that's a good answer. Probably not. Katerina says, it depends on the enthusiasm of the teacher. All right, so it all comes down to us, Ioanna, at the end of the day, doesn't it? Okay, thank you. What if you showed your students a picture of Shakespeare looking like this? He's not so distant anymore. He's not so distant. He's more approachable, isn't he? We have to introduce him to them, yes. And they may not know who he is. Thank you, Katerina. Yeah, they may not even know who he is. So now in this picture, he's not so distant anymore. And what I would like to talk to you about is the following. This guy right there that you see on your screen, those of you that like hip hop and you are hip hop fans, you might know this man. This is Akala, who is a hip hop artist, and he made a talk a few years ago where he explored the connections between the language used in Shakespeare and the language used in hip-hop songs, and the power of the language used in Shakespeare's plays and sonnets, and their connection to hip-hop. And one of the things that he did is what we're about to do right now, and I would very kindly ask for your contribution to this. I am going to show you on your screen a quote will appear, and I would like you to type in the chat box whether you think that quote comes from Shakespeare or hip hop. All right, let's try it. The first quote is this. Number one, to destroy the beauty from which one came. Is that Shakespeare? Is that hip hop or Shakespeare? What do you think? To destroy the beauty from which one came. Just type in the chat box your answer, hip hop or Shakespeare. And write number one, so that we know that you're talking about the first quote. Hip hop, Christina says, okay. Anything different? Okay. Shakespeare. Shakespeare. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, he doesn't look like Shakespeare, does he? It's not from Shakespeare. It's from a hip hop song by Jay-Z, and the song is titled "You Must Love Me." Okay, let's go to the next one. Next quote. I was not born under a rhyming planet. I was not born under a rhyming planet. What is that? Hip hop or Shakespeare? What do you think? Christina says hip hop. Any other answers? Shakespeare, okay. It does come from Shakespeare, and it's from the play Much Ado About Nothing. Okay, third quote. Maybe it's hatred I'd spew, maybe it's food for the spirit. Maybe it's hatred I spew, maybe it's food for the spirit. What do you think, Shakespeare or hip hop? Where does this quote come from? Okay, Shakespeare, Shakespeare, hip hop, Shakespeare. Okay, it's not from Shakespeare, it's from Eminem and a song called Renegade. Last one, number 4, last one. Love is bright and dark, hot and cold, sick and healthy. What about this one? Where does it come from? Shakespeare, Shakespeare, Shakespeare. Okay. You answered very promptly to this one. I assume you feel very confident about this one. Love is bright and dark, hot and cold, sick and healthy. And yes, indeed, it does come from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Okay. Thank you very much for your contribution. Now, is that activity something that you can do with your students? I'm sure it is. I'm sure that's something that you can do with your students, and I'm very positive that they will enjoy it themselves. Andronikos, they will love it. Thank you very much. I'm sure they will. So, and what you can do next after this activity, if you choose to use it in the classroom, we don't need to read Shakespeare in the classroom. You don't have to read Romeo and Juliet, but you can take a quote like what we did and do an activity on this quote. Like, for example, the last quote that we saw, love is bright and dark, hot and cold, sick and healthy, which comes from Romeo and Juliet, and that's a picture taken from the movie, the first version, the very first movie on Romeo and Juliet. And then we can raise some questions and some topics for discussion in the classroom. Like, for example, what do you think Shakespeare means here? What is the meaning of bright and dark? Love being bright and dark and hot and cold? Or when is love bright? And what does dark represent? What do we associate darkness with? And then you can ask them a language question to boost their knowledge of the language. Can you think of more opposites to add to the quote? Bright and dark, hot and cold, sick and healthy. What else can you think of, students? And lastly, there is an idea for homework that that you can give to your students. Write your own brief definition of love. They are teenagers. Of course, they're interested in love, and I'm sure they will have interesting things to say about love. And an extra activity, if you have time and if time allows, role play. You can easily find the relevant scene where this quote is taken from. I think Romeo speaks these words. So you can find the scene, and they can act it out in the classroom. Now, some more questions. Andronikos, thank you for your comment. Students will produce their own pieces, and this will boost not only language, but also the sense of achievement. I completely agree with you. Thank you for your comment. And it will be great fun as well. Okay, some comprehension questions that we can give our students. Now, I am using the example of Romeo and Juliet, but these can apply to any literary text. First, we start with the low-level thinking skills and the low-level thinking questions, which will be questions like, who was Romeo's best friend? That tests knowledge. Or what actions show Juliet's love? That tests comprehension. What would happen if Juliet didn't take the drug? That's application. We ask students to take the knowledge that they already have and apply it to a hypothetical situation. What would happen if Juliet didn't take the drug? And then we move on to the high-level thinking questions, such as, what conclusions can we draw about the role of women from the way Juliet's father treats his daughter? That's analysis. What changes could you make to the plot of Romeo and Juliet, or any other text that you choose to use in the classroom, if you were to rewrite the text? What would you change? How would you bring it to today's standards? And considering today's social norms, what changes would you make? That's creation. That's synthesis. And lastly, the highest level of thinking is evaluation. Would it be better if Romeo and Juliet just split up and not cause all this fuzz? Would it be better? Why or why not? And here we ask our students to use their critical thinking, because at the end of the day, that's what we want them to do. We want to encourage them to become critical thinkers. And what's a better way to become a critical thinker than through literature? Now, let's move on to look at some other ideas for poetry this time that we can use in the classroom. And one of them is this one. Read the jumbled poem and reorder it in order to rhyme. So This is a stanza. No, these are two stanzas taken from a poem titled "Anyone Lived in a Pretty How Town," but it's jumbled up. And what students have to do, they have to reorder it so that it makes sense and it rhymes. The first line is the original. Anyone lived, and I kept the original punctuation. So it starts with a small letter, not a capital. Anyone lived in a pretty how town. Then we have to find a word that rhymes with town. Okay, we're looking. We have the word down. Anyone lived in a pretty how town with up so floating many bells down. Women and men, both little and small. We have to find something that rhymes with small. Cared for anyone, not at all. And so on and so forth. Now, this kind of activity doesn't only teach them vocabulary and rhyming patterns, but it also looks at cohesion, because the poem has to rhyme, but it also has to make sense. So they have to use cohesion devices in order to. They have to think about cohesion in order to complete this successfully. Another idea for poetry could be the following. There is a book titled Poems by Teens for Teens, and it's exactly what it says in the title. It's poetry written by teenagers, and so that other teenagers can relate to and read those poems. You can find many of them online, and I chose one for us today for the purposes of this session. Can Anybody Hear Me by KTM Eliot. And I took the first four stanzas, and I will give you some ideas on the activities that you can do on using these different stanzas. The ideas for the activities, it will appear, they will appear in the blue boxes on your screen. So the first stanza says, I want someone to hold me, but I'm the only one here. I want someone to listen to me, but I'm the only ear. Now, one activity that we can do using this stanza is reading out loud for pronunciation purposes and intonation purposes. And a question that we can ask is, how does the poet feel? Write 2 notes about how the poet feels only by reading this stanza. And have you ever felt the same? I'm sure they have. I'm sure they have felt the same sometime in their life. Why? What happened? The next stanza says, can anybody hear me? Does anybody care? Does anybody even know I'm dealing with gap? So an activity here could be complete with a word that rhymes. So they have to think of a word that rhymes with care. Does anyone? Oh, thank you, Katerina. Despair. Absolutely. Yes, that's the word. That's the precise word which is in the original poem. Thank you. For the third stanza, the last word is missing. There are voices in my gap saying I should gap. Will anybody even tell gap? They're only just a gap. Now here, we can ask students to complete using their own words. This way, they personalize the poem. They take it and they make it theirs. But we have to guide them so that they can come up with some words and words that rhyme. Okay? And lastly, we have the last stanza that says, does anybody love me? Would they shed a tear? Would anybody even care if I were to disappear? What we can do here, we can do a language activity such as the following. Name the grammatical pattern we use to talk about things which are unreal. Which grammatical pattern can you see, students, that we have done before in our previous lessons, and we use this to talk about things which are not real, impossible situations? And they would, of course, say the second conditional. Would anybody even care if I were to disappear? And you can go over the structure of the second conditional again with them. All right, and the last activity, it's something that, again, I will ask for your contribution to this one. The last example I'm going to show you, it's from Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky. Now, let's read this. Let's read this this stanza together. It's the first stanza of Jabberwocky, and it says, "'Twas brilling and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mom raths outgrabe." Now, I'm not going to ask you what it means. I'm not going to ask you anything about the meaning of this poem, because it's nonsense. It's one of the famous nonsense poems. What I'm going to ask you to do is answer the following questions about the poem, even though we have no idea what it means. We don't know the words. They're not existing words, most of them. They're nonsense. But look at question 1. Can you find 2 infinitive verbs, 3 adjectives, and 4 nouns? If you do find them, type them in the chat box. Two infinitive verbs. Okay, we have Euphemia already found Jaya and Gimbal. Well done, well done. Yes, exactly. What about the 3 adjectives? Can you spot 3 adjectives there? I'm sure you can. Mimsy, Euphemia says, I would agree with that. Slithy, yes. I disagree with outgrabe. I disagree with outgrabe. Brilling, it was brilling. Yeah, it could be an adjective. Brilling could be an adjective. It was brilling. Okay. Slithy, mimsy, yes. And mom. Thank you, Stavroula. Mom, yeah, mom wraths. Mom wraths. Outgrabe, now, my guess is that that is a verb. Outgrabe. Okay, good. Thank you very much. What about nouns? 4 nouns. Tove, thank you, Bianca, yes. The toves, it's a noun. Toves, Wabe, Borogoves, and Raths. Yes, Wabe, Toves, Borogoves, Raths was. Okay, well done. Yes, absolutely. Good. Now you're answering questions. Oh, wait. Okay. And then we have more questions. We don't have to answer these now, but these could be questions for your students. What are the toves like? What did the toves do and where? And who were Mimsy? Now, we have answered questions about a poem in a language that we know nothing of. What kind of knowledge did we use to answer these questions? Obviously, not vocabulary knowledge, but syntax. Thank you, Mary. Syntax, grammar knowledge. Yeah. Yes, good. Thank you. Thank you, Bianca. Grammar and syntax knowledge. That's something that we can point out to our students. And that shows the importance of the how important grammar and sentence structure and syntax are. And guessing, Andronico says, yeah, okay, I'm not going to argue with this one. Yes. Okay. Lastly, there is a homework idea there that you can do with your students after this poem activity. Replace the nonsense words with meaningful ones to give the poem new meaning. So you can have them replace the words slithy and toves and gimble and wave and borogoves, yeah, with meaningful words. Okay. Now here are some more ideas that we can use to exploit literature in the classroom. And there are some readers for different levels, starting from lower levels on your on the left-hand side up to higher levels on the right-hand side of your screen. And some other activities include role play, prediction, design the cover for a book. Yeah. Discussion ideas like the ones we saw before about Romeo and Juliet. Mini reading sessions. Write a blurb for the cover, like a short 20 or 30 word description. What if this happened? What would the character do? And retell the story. Okay, our conclusions for the day. I think we saw that literature requires active involvement from everyone in the classroom and promotes critical thinking. Two of the main things that teachers should consider before using literature in the classroom: we should make sure that the language level is appropriate and that the text can be easily exploited for language purposes. And I think most of us would agree that Shakespeare is not something to be feared. Shakespeare can be fun. And it all comes down to how we approach Shakespeare and other texts in the classroom. Thank you, Youssef, for your comment. This was very beneficial. I'm very happy to hear this. Thank you very much. Now, before we finish off, I would like to go over and show you some of the classic readers that we have at Hamilton House for different levels. For level 1, these are some of the readers that we have available. Cinderella, The Emperor's New Clothes. For level 2, five more books, and these are graded to suit the level of the students. Level 3, Peter Pan is one of them, the one we saw before in the presentation, which is used in Amazing English 1. The Snow Queen. I'm glad you liked the ideas and you found them useful. I think our students will enjoy these activities, and I'm sure if you try some of these activities with them, they will remember you for this. We've got Aesop's Fables, The Lion and the Mouse, The Tortoise and the Hare, which have the moral meaning, and they help everyone become better people. And lastly, we've got some non-fiction readers, again, for different levels. Amazing Water, Animals We Live With, Healthy Food Choices, and more. That's for A2. A2 plus, B1, and B1 plus. Now, I would like to thank you very much for your contribution to this session. Your participation was very valuable. If you have any questions, now it's the time, and Terry will join us for the questions session. Hi, Terry. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Aki. That was a great presentation, as I would agree with everyone. So yeah, we will start the question and answer segment now. So if you have a question for Akis or myself about the presentation or about anything in general, please just make sure to put a question mark at the end so that the system recognizes the question, and let us begin. So let's hear your questions, guys. And also, I'm looking at the Facebook feeds too. So if you have a question and you're watching us on Facebook, I will I'll transfer your question here to our platform. And while you guys are all thinking of your questions, I kind of wanted to just, mention that with the graded readers that we have at Hamilton House that we just saw in the previous slides, we have, apart from having graded all of them by levels according to the CEFR, we've created activities, comprehension activities at the back of the book, so that you don't, as a teacher, you don't have to come up with these exercises after you've read the book with your students. So, and all of them also have ebooks, which have fully animated versions of the stories for the primary level readers and the Aesop's Fables. And for the non-fiction readers, we have documentary style videos that we have created that also narrate the book and bring it to life. So, we've got the full package for our readers in order to facilitate them in your lessons. So let's see if there are any questions. Let's hear them, guys. I see lots of typing. All we need to do is have you hit an enter button. Any questions? Thank you. Lots of, well, thank yous is always good to have. Anybody on Facebook? No. Well, again, I mean, like Akis has said before, that when there are no questions, that means it's just such an amazingly concise and clear presentation that, here we go. Let's do it.
Okay, translated literary texts. Well, nowadays literature is translated worldwide in 30 languages, in 40 languages. So as long as the translation is a good translation, then absolutely go ahead and use it. There is no problem with that. I assume you mean if the original literary text is written in a language other than English and it's translated into English. Yeah. Whether it's absolutely, it's the same. Doesn't make any difference. The themes are there. The underlining meanings are still there. So nothing changes. It doesn't really make any difference.
Great. Thank you, Aki. All right. I think if there are no more questions, I think we can wrap up today's session. So if you do have a question, now's your chance to type it in there. Otherwise, I would like to thank you, Akis, again for joining us.
Thank you very much. The pleasure was all mine, and I mean it.
Great. Excellent. All right, everybody. Well, we'll be signing off now, and we look forward to seeing you next week. We will have another session on Monday. Take a look at our social media so you can find exact details and registration links. And everybody have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend. Thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.